Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 13. I am your host, Dan Matson, and this is the world's very first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, and tradition of wooden boats. Well, folks, it's 10 days before Christmas, and recording episode number 13 today. It's great to have you back with us, with me. Nobody else here but me right now. And I'm having a lot of fun with this as usual. In today's featured segment, I have an interview with Larry Cheek. Larry's got an interesting story, which you'll hear today. It's about 38 minutes long. The way I met Larry was I had scheduled an interview on Whidbey Island with Brad Rice, the boatwright, and I wanted to schedule a second interview on Whidbey Island because it's a little bit of a drive for me. So I Googled wooden boat, Whidbey Island, and up came Larry's name. And Larry's got his own website, which I'll put on the links on the website. And he's an author and a journalist first, but he's also started building boats, wooden boats, a few years ago. And he's written a book about it. So stay tuned for that. You won't want to miss it. Just a reminder, this is a weekly show that's about 30 to 60 minutes in length. I publish it every Thursday by the end of the day. And the number of downloads and people going to the website is increasing every month, so that's pretty exciting. That means somebody out there is going and listening and enjoying this podcast, so that's cool. It takes a little bit of work to do this, but I love doing it because I love wooden boats. As far as connecting with me, you can go to my website at hookedonwoodenboats.com, and each week I post some notes in there about the podcasts that I do, kind of like a blog post, and I have pictures, and there's a player button so you can listen to the podcast right from the website. You can also go to iTunes to subscribe to the podcast. There's an RSS button on my site also that you can use to subscribe. You can email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. On Twitter, woodenboatdan, twitter.com, woodenboatdan. And on Facebook, facebook.com/woodenboatdan. I also have a voicemail feedback hotline at 424-261-2360. And on my website, I have an email subscription list. If you'd like to subscribe to that list, all I ask for is your first and last name and your email address and your mother's maiden name. No, I'm just kidding. I don't ask for that. Real basic information. And then I send out special mailings to that group of people. Once or twice a month, an article or a video, other resources. And it's a way for me to connect directly with people because everybody's got a different story about wooden boats, and I'd love to hear your story and see pictures of your boats. So please go there and subscribe to my email list if you would. Last week I talked about what my next boat building project is going to be, and I mentioned several boats, and I think I've got it narrowed down to 2 boats now. The goal here is to get a real light canoe or kayak style boat that I can throw on top of my car and sit in it on the bottom of the boat and paddle. Something that's pretty light, that looks good, and performs well in the water. I'm not looking for a performance kayak type of thing because to me Greenland rolling doesn't look too fun. But anyway, I've kind of got it narrowed down to sassafras canoe. I've been looking on Chesapeake Light Crafts website at the sassafras canoe. There's a 12, 14, and 16-foot version of that. And I'm leaning towards either the 12 or the 14-foot version. Actually, what I'm planning on doing if I go with that boat is I'll buy the book called The Canoe Shop and build it from the book. The other boat I'm looking at is a Gem Watercraft boat. You can go to gemwatercraft.com, and it's a solo tripping canoe that weighs 33 to 43 pounds, 14 feet long and 30 inches wide. Nice looking boat. So I'm looking at those two boats, and I'll probably pull the trigger here in the next week or two. So I'm pretty excited about that. I haven't gotten my hands dirty in the shop for a while. My last boat was a 12-foot skin-on frame kayak. It was kind of an experimental boat. I wanted something real light and easy, and that's what I got, but I also got a boat that's really too small for me, and it's has almost no initial stability, and secondary stability is probably worse. So it's a challenge to keep upright. It's a pretty boat, though, but not real functional for me, my size, and so on. So I'm looking forward to the next build here. Last week I kind of threw out a question about Akumi marine plywood, mentioning that you can buy the plywood that's certified to the British Standard 1088, but you can also buy the import or Chinese product that is not certified, but it's supposed to be built to the same standard. So I've actually talked to a few people about that. I talked to Kiwi at Edensaw Woods in Port Townsend last week when I was there, and his experience has been that the Chinese product costs half as much and performs just as well as the British Standard 1088 product. And yeah, he's said they've had really good success with the Chinese product. So that's probably the way I'm going to go on my boat to save some money. Also, last week I was interviewed by over the phone or over Skype. I was interviewed by the podcast answer man Cliff Ravenscraft. Cliff is a gentleman that I took the podcasting class from back in September to learn how to get my website set up and do podcasting. Really great guy. I've gotten to know him a little bit, and he interviewed me because he's been following my story and really excited about the progress I'm making with my podcast and the number of listeners that I have, and the fact that it's a very niche, if you will, topic that I'm doing, and the fact that 5 years from now I'd like to have a decent income from it. So he's been following my story. So he interviewed me last week for his show. If you'd like to listen to that, it's about 20 minutes long or so. You can go to the podcastanswerman.com and look for episode number 239. And about 15 or 20 minutes into that episode, he plays that interview. So it was a lot of fun doing it. Cliff's a great guy. Thanks, Cliff, if you're listening. I appreciate it. Well, I think we're going to move on to the interview here with Larry Cheek. Again, Larry's a journalist and an author and a boat builder. He got a cool story. He's got a book. And we're going to go ahead and get started on the interview. So take it away, Larry. Today is December 2nd, and I'm sitting in a beautiful little 20-foot sailboat, a Sam Devlin design, with the builder of the boat, Larry Cheek. Larry, welcome to our show today.
Thanks, Dan.
Good to have you here. Thanks for having me up. I was scheduled to do an interview on Whidbey Island with another gentleman, and I found Larry on the internet and found out that he's built some boats and done some pretty cool things. So, Larry, tell us about yourself. Where are you from, and what's your background, and so on?
I come from a place where nobody thinks about boats. Absolutely nobody. El Paso, Texas. I'm not sure I'd ever even seen a boat until I was 18 years old. But then I spent most of my adult life after leaving El Paso in Tucson, Arizona. And there are some boats in Tucson, but you have to drive a minimum of 100 miles to get to a man-made lake in the desert before you can use that boat. So it still wasn't a very big thing on my horizon. But then after my wife and I moved to the Seattle area in 1996, we almost immediately got into kayaking. Not building yet. We bought a couple of good factory-made fiberglass kayaks. Took several courses. Began leading kayak trips. I mean, we really got into it. And then in 2002, I actually had a magazine assignment to write about the wooden boat festivals up here in the Northwest, both Port Townsend and Lake Union. So I went to both those festivals, and I really got seduced by the artistry, the beauty of the boats, and by the people themselves who were building boats, both the amateurs and professionals. So I decided then to, I wanted another kayak. I only had two. I mean, that's certainly not enough. So started looking around at kayak kits, settled on a Pygmy Artic Tern 14, and built that as my first boat, which, by the way, I think is an excellent entree into boat building of any kind. Whatever your end objective is, to start with a kit for a kayak, canoe, or a small rowboat of some kind, and that gives you a kind of a foundation of some of the techniques you'll use for any kind of wood fiberglass composite boat, and also gives you a good idea whether you like doing it or not, whether you have the temperament, the patience, the eye for detail. So that was my entree, and it turned out to be a life-changing experience.
Okay. So you're an author and a journalist by trade, by vocation. Is that right?
That's right.
I've been doing that for years.
I have a journalism degree, and I spent the first 17 years of my working life working for daily newspapers. And I've been a freelance writer ever since then. That's the last 25 years, writing for magazines, other newspapers as a freelancer, and teaching, writing.
Yeah. So who were you working for when they asked you to cover the wooden boat festivals?
That was an assignment for Sunset Magazine.
Sunset Magazine. What year was that, approximately?
It was, I think 2001.
Okay. All right. So you covered those festivals, and you really got fell in love with the wooden boat community at that time and started to connect, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. I just went to both festivals, wandered around and through and on top of the boats, and interviewed a bunch of boat builders, and I just found them. They had interesting stories. They had interesting philosophies. The issue of perfectionism raised its ugly head. I didn't yet at that point understand what an issue it would become for me. Since I was at that time a perfectionist, I am now a recovering perfectionist. If you are a practicing perfectionist and you're building a wooden boat, you will never finish the thing.
Yeah, I can testify to that. So when you first came to Seattle, you got into kayaking. So I'm just curious, how did you get into kayaking? Because you hadn't been around boats at all.
Right, my wife and I. It was our first weekend out of town. We took the ferry over to Orcas Island because we'd never been to the San Juans, having just moved here from Arizona. And we were walking around the town of East Sound, and here's one of those boards on the sidewalk that said, "Sea kayak tours, no experience necessary." And we looked at each other and we just said, well, why not? So 30 minutes into that, we literally knew we were into something we were going to be doing the rest of our lives.
Really?
It was that transformational.
Yeah, okay. So you bought some production boats, and then you went and built a kayak. So tell me about that first kayak you built. Where did you get the kit? How long did it take? You still have the boat, I think, here in the shop.
It's over there on that wall, and I still use it. One. I absolutely love that boat. That's the 14-foot Artic Tern by Pygmy Kayaks. I kind of wish I'm almost tempted to build another one now because I know so much more about boat building and I could do a better job of building it.
Yeah.
But the essential design of the boat is just wonderful. I've paddled probably 75 different kayaks by different manufacturers, and I would not trade that for any one of them. That is just a magnificent boat. Feels like an extension of my body.
Wow.
But let's see, I spent about 3 months building it. It seemed difficult at the time because I was really stretching my abilities. I had not done much woodworking before. Certainly never built a boat before. Never done any fiberglassing before. Like most wooden kayaks, it's made of okume plywood with a fiberglass skin, and probably the fiberglassing is the most difficult part of building one of these kayak kits. And I did a structurally sound but aesthetically sloppy job of it, and I could do it a lot better now. So I'm almost tempted to give that boat away and just buy another one and another kit, or design a kayak myself and go at it again.
How much does that boat weigh?
About 36 or 37 pounds.
Oh, that's nice. So that's very light, easy to put on top of a car and carry around.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things. I'm a small guy, but I can easily put that boat up on top of the car by myself if I want to go out alone.
Yeah. So that was a stitch and glue design?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So you built that. What year did you build that, Larry?
2002.
Okay. So then what did you build next?
Almost immediately after I finished that, I was really hooked. So I went over to the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building.
I like that word "hook," by the way.
Yeah,
right. By looking at my website,
that has a certain correspondence with your website. But it does hook you.
Yeah,
no question about it.
Yeah.
So I signed up for a 10-day wood strip kayak building course at the Northwest School for Wood and Boat Building with Joe Greenlee,
which is Port Hadlock, Washington.
Port Hadlock,
over by Port Townsend. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Port Hadlock. And went over there and took that. There were 6 of us in the class. We completed this boat here you see on this other wall beside us.
Yeah.
We finished about 2/3 of it in those 10 days under Joe Greenlee's expert tutoring. And at the end of the 10 days, he cut 6 little wood strips of different lengths and held them in his hand, and we drew the straws, and I won the not yet completed boat.
You're kidding.
So I took it home and finished it.
Cool.
And then gave it to my wife.
Wow.
And she sold her factory kayak.
Yeah. So tell me about the construction of that boat.
This is a wood strip construction. It's made of red cedar and Alaskan yellow cedar strips that are 3/16 of an inch thick, and I think they're 7/8 of an inch wide, built around temporary framework of bulkheads to give it the shape. Then after you have all the strips glued together, you take out the temporary framework and fiberglass the inside and outside. It's what's called a monocoque construction, so that the stressed skin of the boat itself provides all the structure it needs. It's like an airplane fuselage.
Okay.
So what you have is a composite cedar and fiberglass boat that's very light. That's a 16-foot boat, and it weighs 42 pounds. Very light and extremely strong. You can certainly batter it and bash it on a beach, as we have. We don't baby either of these wooden kayaks, but you couldn't break that boat any easier than you could a solid fiberglass boat, which would weigh 20 pounds more.
Yeah.
So I'm a great fan of.
So essentially, it's long strips of cedar that are glued together on edge. Is it a cove and bead?
Yes, cove and bead construction.
Cove and bead construction. So they're glued together to form the shape of the hull. When they're all done, it's basically a mono hull, and the deck too really is part of the hull, isn't it?
Yeah.
It says it's built
just
the
like
same
an
way.
aircraft fuselage. Yeah. It's incredibly strong.
Cool, very pretty boat. Well, congratulations on winning that in your class. That's pretty sweet. I don't know how the other 5 guys felt after that, but beautiful boat. So what year did you finish that?
I think that was 2003, the next year after the Pygmy, that I built that.
Okay, all right. So then, so that was your second boat. So then you moved on to your third boat. So tell me how that happened and what that boat was.
Well, about this time we were starting to get into sailing. Patty and I had noticed that sometimes the wind blows, which is, when you're in a kayak, is just kind of an annoyance because the wind never blows the direction you want to go. It's always blowing at you. So we decided we wanted to try sailing. We took an introductory course from the Center for Wooden Boats on Lake Union. If you Lake Union is a great place to learn to sail because the wind is always changing because of all the hills and buildings around the lake. So every 15 seconds you're adjusting the set of your sails or attacking or doing something. So we took that course and then we signed up for the U.S. sailing curriculum taught by Windworks, which is a pretty rigorous curriculum, and some people can complete the whole thing in a couple of months. It took us 3 years, but
wow.
But during that time anyway, we decided, well, of course we need our own boat.
Let me just ask you real quick, Windworks, are they is that a national chain or is that a local Seattle-based company?
It's a Seattle company that's, it's a charter, boat charter outfit. It's a sailing school and it's a brokerage for sailboats, all 3 in one.
Good.
And they, just to put in a plug, I have no stock in the company, but I think they just do an excellent job with instruction.
Cool.
It's very professional, very consistent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not cheap, but you learn the ropes.
Yeah. Okay. So you went through that course.
Yeah. And I wanted to build a day sailor first. I don't think it's a good, unless you really have a lot of confidence and skills, you shouldn't start out with a cruising sailboat like this one we're sitting on now that has all the complications of a cabin, a lot of structure, a lot of weight, ballast, an electrical system, all these complications. No, much easier. If you have modest skills like I did, very modest skills, you're much better to start off with a simple day sailor. So I first looked around at kits, and there were several kits out there that they kind of fit what I wanted to have as a day sailor. And I decided, no, I don't want to build a kit because I know I can build a kit. I'm the kind of person who I thrive on challenges. I need to keep challenging myself. I've done this all my life to do something I don't know if I can do. So I decided, okay, I'm going to build a boat from scratch. And the boat I chose, the design I chose, was Sam Devlin's Zephyr. It's a 13.5-foot sailing dinghy based on the melon seed designs from the East Coast back around the 1870s, 1880s. Although, of course, with modern construction, again, it's stitch and glue, plywood, epoxy, composite.
Yeah.
So I spent 1.5 years building that boat.
You bought the plans from Sam?
Right.
And then you had to did that require any lofting, or was everything, you just had to draw it out full size on your...
Yeah, it's not lofting in the traditional sense that you have to do with a Carvel planked boat, but you don't have a full scale template either. Yeah. What you have to do is scale up the your pieces from the plans.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is, it's not too difficult.
Yeah.
But I did run into a lot of difficulties building that boat. It was It was one of the hardest things I've done in my life,
Really?
even though it's a relatively simple boat.
Yeah.
And I write about all this in my book, The Year of the Boat.
Yeah.
I had to face a lot of, not only issues of acquiring craft skills that I didn't have yet, but I had to face a lot of personal demons. My prime character defect is impatience. I was still in the throes of perfectionism. I had a lot of self-doubt. You can read about all of this in the book, and I think the lessons in there apply to all kinds of things, not just building boats.
Mm-hmm.
But I faced all of those, and the boat's name is Far From Perfect, and it is
I like that.
It is indeed far from perfect. But it does what boats do. It floats and it sails. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot and acquired both confidence and skills, some of the skills I needed to take on this next boat, the one we're now sitting in, mm-hmm. the 18-foot, 8-inch Devlin Winter Wren.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to back up just a little bit here, did before you built your first boat, had you done any woodworking at all?
I'd done some straight line woodworking.
Okay.
I'd built a few speaker cabinets and a bookcase or two.
Yeah.
Very simple stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't have any decent tools.
Yeah.
I had nothing more elaborate than a power drill and a skill saw
mm-hmm.
before.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So I really had to. The only more serious tool I bought for that first boat, the first sailboat, the day sailor, was the bandsaw, because I'd read up on tools, and a lot of people had said, well, if you only have one stationary tool in your shop for boat building, it should be a bandsaw.
I see.
And so I'm glad I did that.
Yeah,
it's true.
Definitely.
You do need a bandsaw.
Yeah, yeah.
And that proved to be enough for building that first boat.
Yeah.
When we moved over here to Whidbey Island, I had a very small inheritance from my dad, and I put $5,000 into some good tools.
Okay. Nice.
The table saw you see there, the drill press, the Festool router, the really nice Festool multiple mode sander, so forth. Cool. I have almost everything I need.
Yeah, right.
Everything except the skills.
Well, you're learning those, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm a great believer in buying tools that are better than you are.
Yeah.
Because they give you something to grow into, they challenge you.
Yeah.
And they demand a lot of you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If I'm, I have this wonderful Lee Nielsen plane now that my wife got me for last Christmas. And that plane is still way better than I am.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly aware of that. And I feel the need to live up to it.
Yeah. Those are beautiful planes.
So instead of struggling with a crummy tool,
yeah,
it's sort of like the tool is struggling with me, and it's allowing me to use it while I get better.
Right.
And that's a good feeling.
Definitely. So you finished the Day Sailor, the 13-foot Day Sailor, and what year was that, Larry?
2007.
Okay, so you're an author, so you decided to write a book about. So how did you decide to do that?
Well, I'm always looking for things to write about.
Mm-hmm.
I had never written a book about anything involving my own life before. I'd written books on archaeology and architecture and travel and nature. But I was never a part of those books. I was just the narrator, the chronicler, the guy who gathered the information and tried to make sense of it. So I decided to write this book about something I was doing myself.
I see.
And I actually wrote the book in real time along with the boat, building the boat.
Okay. So give me a synopsis of the book, if you could.
Well, I like to think that it's not so much a book about building a boat, although some of the technical stuff of the process of building is in there, certainly, and it's kind of a continuous narrative from beginning to end. But it's more about the story of personal growth and meeting the challenges of doing something that you're not really prepared to do.
Yeah, and it's called The Year of the Boat.
Year of the Boat, published by Sasquatch Books in 2008.
Okay.
Available at your friendly local bookstore.
Okay, and available online too at Amazon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for our listeners, and that was published in 2009?
2008.
2008, okay.
Yeah.
Cool, very good. Yeah.
And I'm now working on another book that kind of grows out of the boat building experience, but it's not literally about building boats. It's about the values and character in the working life. So it deals in greater depth with some of these issues like perfectionism and character. I think building a boat is a great test and shaper of personal character.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share a little story with you where you see this combing that we're
sailboat combing that we're sitting against here.
It's forming a backrest for us. One of the things you discover when you build a boat is that you have to keep rewarding yourself from time to time with little accomplishments. Making something happen on the boat that's visually rewarding, so you can say, I did that. It looks more like a boat now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was one of those days. I was working on the combing. I didn't have any other pressing work that day, income producing work. So I think I'm going to finish the combing today. Get it all shaped, installed, trimmed, everything. So a good 8 or 9 hours worth of work. I really wanted that as a reward. And about 2/3 of the way through this day, I realized that if I went ahead and screwed and epoxied the combing in, which I was just about ready to do, there were a couple of areas behind the combing on the backside that I hadn't yet coated with epoxy to waterproof them. Mm-hmm. So, got a decision. Is it... this is way above the water line. It's probably protected from splash and rain. Is it ever going to get wet? Could it be subject to rot? Yeah, probably not. And yet there was something that was nagging at me. Mm-hmm. That this is just not right. And I realized, okay, if I don't finish this today, if I stop and epoxy this, I'm going to have to wait a day for the epoxy to cure. I can't finish my combing today. So I actually did kind of agonize over that decision, and then I decided, okay, you're going to do the right thing. You're going to delay gratification and waterproof the backside of the combing. So I did. And what I came out of that understanding was that character is like a muscle. Doing the right thing, even when nobody's watching, when it probably doesn't make any difference. Doing the right thing prepares you for that time when you have to expend a whole lot of character to do the right thing in a big way, where it's going to be difficult, where people are watching.
Yeah.
So that's an example, I think, of how boat building builds character.
Yeah, I like that.
One of many.
I like that.
Examples.
Yeah, because you couldn't have the immediate gratification of completing what you wanted to complete, but you had the gratification of knowing that you had done it right. It took you longer, but you had done it the correct way.
Plus, it's an episode in my new book.
Is it? Okay. So after you built the 13-footer, then you started building this boat. So tell me how you decided to build this boat and give me some of the gory details on this one.
By this time, I had become friends with Sam Devlin. I have just immense respect for his ability as a designer. I think he designs beautiful boats that also happen to sail or do their boat things very well. He also designs power boats and rowboats. So I compared this with a lot of other cruising sailboats in this size class, 18 to 20 feet, and I decided I really wanted to do this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought the plans and have this pretty nice large garage here on Whidbey, which I hadn't had before. I built the earlier boat in a much smaller garage on the mainland. This garage is 26 by 27 feet, which is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
It's never seen a car. It's nothing but a boat shop.
Yeah, very nice.
So I have, it took 3 years to build it, about 3,500 hours. I'm slow. I'm really slow. Part of that is, a great deal of that is just inefficiency and not really knowing very well what I'm doing and having to do things over. Most amateur boat builders will identify with that.
Yeah, I can identify.
I am not a perfectionist anymore. You can start going through this boat and you'll quickly see all kinds of things that aren't perfect. But it's pretty good. I think structurally it's very solid. It sails beautifully. About 2/3 of the way through construction, we finally stumbled onto another boat of this design, the Winter Wren, over at Port Townsend. A young boat builder had bought an old Winter Wren that Sam had built in his shop back in the 1980s and restored it. And we were able to sail this. This was in the 2010 Wooden Boat Festival, Port Townsend. He let us sail with him for an afternoon, and I was so relieved because I loved the boat.
Oh, nice.
And
so that was after you were into it a couple thousand hours.
That's
already.
Exactly. And I was pretty worried. What if it's a pig? What if it just sails like an utter pig?
Yeah.
I don't know enough to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it didn't sail like a pig. It sailed just beautifully.
Yeah.
It was very responsive and forgiving and sweet. And
so tell me about the design of this boat. What is the design exactly? Or the style of boat?
Well, I don't know that it has a style, except that it's traditional looking, very contemporary in the technology it uses, being stitch and glue, fiberglass, wood, composite. But it has a gaff rig, which is a very traditional rig,
mm-hmm.
and if you were to look at it from 100 yards away out in the water, you could very easily take it for a boat that's 75 or 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when you get up close and you start seeing how it's constructed that you say, oh yeah, well, it's a modern boat.
Mm-hmm.
Just looks very traditional.
Yeah. So does this have a sleeping area down in the cabin?
Yeah, it's a very simple cabin. It has a berth that's reasonably comfortable for two adults.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't have standing headroom. No decent no boat this size does. It's got about 45 inches of sitting headroom.
Mm-hmm.
So you're comfortable enough sitting in there.
Yeah. What about centerboard or keel on this boat?
It's a dagger board.
Dagger board
differs from a centerboard in that it drops straight down.
Okay.
So it's a weighted dagger board.
Oh, really?
It has 650 pounds of internal ballast. I built...
this boat does?
Yeah.
Really?
Lead ballast. I built positive flotation into it, which is something that that is not on Sam's plans. 2 reasons. One, I'm a chicken sailor. I can't bear the thought of my 3,500 hours of work residing down at the bottom of Puget Sound. But 2, I think that with modern technology, it's just crazy to be building sailboats of any size that are automatically doomed if they get completely swamped and fill with water.
Yeah.
Because a ballasted sailboat, it will go down if it completely fills with water.
Yeah.
Why do we do this? The airbag technology that we routinely use in cars could be easily adapted to sailboats, and that wouldn't happen. So I don't have the engineering skills to build airbags into this boat, but I did build about 14 cubic feet of foam and air flotation compartments into it.
Cool.
Had to sacrifice some of my storage space for it, but I think it's a decent trade-off.
Oh, definitely. Like you say, if this thing got swamped, you don't want to see it go to the bottom of Puget Sound.
It'll float just barely, but we haven't tested it, but I'm fairly confident of the math. It also, another change I made was this boat has electric auxiliary power.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it has a 24-volt Torpedo electric outboard, which is good for about 2 horsepower.
Yeah.
And 2 deep cycle marine batteries under the berth there.
Oh.
The bilge.
So how much time can you get on those at a moderate speed?
According to the factory specs, I can get 10 to 12 nautical miles of range out of that between recharging, if I have to go that far.
So do you believe the specs? Does that work, you think?
Well, I haven't yet pushed it near that limit.
Yeah.
One of my projects for this winter is to install a battery condition monitor that'll actually act like a fuel gauge.
Oh.
So that then I'll be more willing to trust it.
Yeah, right. So you mainly use that for getting in and out of the harbor and moorage and that sort of thing. Very cool. So any thought of onboard charging for that, solar charging or anything for that rig?
Well, I'd thought about it, but the trouble with solar charging is that it just requires it would require just a huge area of solar cells to do any substantial recharging of 2 100 amp hour batteries. People don't realize how little output there is from our solar cells. They're only about 12% efficient at converting light into electricity.
Yeah.
So that's not really practical. I really think
you have to cover the whole deck of your boat with solar cells.
Well, yeah, and then the sail would kind of shade the deck, and it's hard to do on a sailboat.
Yeah.
Powerboat, it would make more sense on.
Yeah. So what would be your words of encouragement to people that are listening that are thinking about building a boat for the first time or in the middle of a project and maybe struggling or wondering how they got into this mess? What would you say to them? Well,
if you look over here at my wall, you see several things I've put up here to kind of encourage me. One of them is, all great accomplishments are composed entirely of interlocking details.
Very nice.
So you have to have the perseverance to attack the details, but also a sense of how they all fit together to to eventually yield the great accomplishment.
Yeah.
Fear is a down payment of a debt you may not owe. That was actually a Chinese fortune cookie, but I found it quoted in the New York Times, so I figure if the New York Times quotes a fortune cookie, that gives it some credibility.
Yeah, right.
And I think that certainly applies to building a boat, because one of the biggest obstacles we have is fear. Can I do this? Can I do it right? Am I wasting my money?
Yeah.
I think if you persevere, no, you're certainly not wasting your own time or money, and you can do it right. Even if the time comes where you say, I've done so much wrong, I have to throw this away and start over, then that's what you do.
Yeah.
You have to have the courage to do that.
Yeah.
And one of my favorites from the essayist Scott Russell Sanders, who's a friend of mine, as we, let's see, it's hard to read it from here, as we run ourselves ragged by chasing after too many thrills and tasks, so we may become centered and calm by remaining faithful to a few deep concerns.
Very good.
I love that, and I kind of read that to myself every time I came out here to work for 3 or 4 hours. Remain faithful to a few deep concerns, because I felt that building this boat and building it right was a deep concern that was very much worth doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think wooden boats, it's not just a toy for me and my wife to enjoy. I think wooden boats enhance the beauty of life on Earth, and there's something very much worth perpetuating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time with me today, Larry. It's a beautiful boat. Congratulations on seeing it through. That's a 3-year project. That's a long project, but you made it through, and that's awesome.
Thank you.
Could you give us your contact information, Larry, if people want to get a hold of you or look at your website?
People can write me at Wetscape, WETSCAPE, at Comcast.net, and my website, which has some of my writing and a plug for the book. In fact, an excerpt from the book and the blog for this boat, which you can read for free. It's on my website, lawrencewcheek.com.
Okay. And cheek is spelled just like it sounds, C-H-E-E-K.
Right, like the side of your face.
Yeah, okay. And so, last thing I'll ask here is if you have any parting comments for the listeners today.
Don't be afraid.
Okay, cool. All right, I like that. Okay, thanks a lot, Larry, and we'll be in touch. And talk soon. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Larry Cheek. Larry, thanks for doing that. It was a lot of fun to come up to your place and see your boats and have that conversation. And I will post Larry's contact information on the hookedonwoodenboats.com website, so you can go there if you'd like to connect with Larry. Go to his website, send him an email, give him a call, look at pictures of his boats, all that fun stuff. Folks, I just want to interject here that Larry's book, The Year of the Boat, is available through my website. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/resources, or you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com and click on the resources menu item at the top, that'll take you to a resource page with books, and on there is Larry's books. You can click the book there. It'll take you to Amazon, and you can purchase a book, and I would encourage you to do that. Thanks a lot. Back to our regular programming now. One thing I wanted to mention also, I just finished reading a book called Schooner, and Schooner was published in 2010. It's a story of the Gannon and Benjamin Boatyard in Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. It's a story of them building a 60-foot schooner there. Fascinating story. I've mentioned it before. I finished reading it. I would highly recommend the book. It's just got huge pictures in it, and it's just very interesting. You can learn a ton by reading it. And if you are going to purchase that book, if you'd like to go through my website, you can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com and go to the resource page. And on there, you can purchase the book through Amazon. If you do that, I get paid a little bit, which helps a little bit. So anyway, I'd encourage you to do that. Or you can get it for free at your library, which is what I did. Unless you want a copy of it to keep. Please call the listener hotline at 424-261-2360 with any questions or comments that you have. I'd love to hear from you. And I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my email list also that I mentioned earlier. You can also email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. And I would love it if you would leave feedback on iTunes about my podcast. If you like it, give me a 5-star review. That would be really cool. Just a reminder, next week I have an interview with Jake Beatty of the Northwest Maritime Center in Port Townsend, Washington. Jake's been there just about a year, and he's got some really interesting stories personally about his boating experiences over the years, including quite a bit of time on some tall ships and other things. And then he talks about the Northwest Maritime Center and the Wooden Boat Foundation and what they're up to, which they've got some really cool stuff going on. So please tune in again next week. Until then, keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. This is Wooden Boat Dan, over and out. Have a great week.